hosted by 4-time Emmy-nominated producer Frank Pace, with retired New York City firefighter and Vietnam vet Billy O'Connor.
Hello, William. How are you?
Hello, William. I know my brother. I must be on the outs. I'm not Frankie. When I shoot your dog or something, what I do?
No, I was thinking about Patrick Cassidy kept calling you William all last week toward the latter half of the interview. I said, something's wrong here, but maybe William is the right thing to do. Well, you signed in as William.
Well, you know what? When I started writing columns, when I first started writing for the Alligator, the Independent Alligator at the University of Florida at the ripe old age of 58, I used to sign everything William O'Connor. You know, that was the name tag. And then when I got onto Facebook and when we started writing together, one of these people that are involved with social media said, "You got to lose the William. You got to be Billy O'Connor all the time. That's who you are. You can't sign anything but other than Billy O'Connor." But when I signed, a check, which I haven't seen in a million years, then it's William P. O'Connor.
Wait a second, I sent you that check last week.
Yeah, that was an amazing amount of the Bitcoin. I could be buying your house. I buy the house next door to you and drive your house to the ground. If I buy the house next door to you, your real estate's going to drop potentially, precipitously.
No. Well, you know what? No, I'm not going to say it. Derek, where are you? Where are you, Derek? Come in, Derek.
Hola.
Hey, yeah, you did. I'm just talking about when I was just talking about when our guest comes on. You can disappear. Be less frequent.
Be less frequent. That's the trouble with you, Derek. You're too bloody frequent.
Apparently.
Look at this shirt with the Boston. I didn't know you were a Boston guy, man.
That's more my son went to college.
Oh, did he go to Boston University? No kidding.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Geez, I would have been happy if my son would have mopped the men's room at Boston U.
Yeah,
I couldn't get him to open a book, the son of a bitch.
He's a brilliant fellow, my son. So
he is indeed.
Yeah.
What did he major in?
Computer engineering.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Great job. Out of my how do you say he's out of my pocket now?
Off of your payroll?
Off my payroll. Yeah, that's it.
Wow, off your payroll.
Yeah.
My girls are like that. My girls are like, both of them are killing it. They're both super independent. My son, hey, Pop, I got a little problem this week. Hey, Dad, I got a little problem this month. Hey, Pop.
Yeah.
Alligators raise alligators, man. That's it. This kid is like a chip off the old block.
Raise alligators. Well, Billy, I'm so happy to see you with your new internet, your wireless internet. Congratulations, you're clear. I'm sorry, and I'm not so sorry because I can see you clearer now.
Frank, I told you, man, I'm in the 21st century. I'm hip, Frank. I'm a hip guy.
Yeah.
I'm really hip.
You're up to 2005.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Boston, man, they got some weather up there, right? They got some snow and shit up in Boston right now. I mean, not like it's going through Texas.
Yeah.
Well, Texas, crazy.
Yeah, man. Is it just Texas, or was it Louisiana and Arkansas and the whole Southwest?
Well, I was talking to our publishers, who are getting ready to publish our second book. The first book,
Sure, the bookie book fell. That figures.
Hang on, Billy. You carry this for a minute.
Yeah. So the second book, I'm really excited about the second book because it's about a subject that's near and dear in my heart as a bookie, former bookie. It's about the NFL, and it's called Lamar's Gamble, and it's about Lamar Hunt, and it's also about the merger of the leagues and the history of that merger and the time period, which is really significant because the AFL never would have worked had it not been for the 60s and the time of how young people were sick of the old school. You know, they were sick of the old guard. and we're ready for the Giants were running around with tie and collar on and always with the crew cuts, and then Namath came in with the fur coat and the long hair, and that had a lot to do with the AFL succeeding. And Frank, you had mentioned a couple of days ago that you watched that new 30 by 30 of Al Davis versus the NFL.
Yeah, it was awful. It was a complete whitewash of the times.
Well, that's the NFL in a nutshell. I mean, I don't have any qualms about them whitewashing their product. We all like to make sure we put our best foot forward. But I don't see how you do an hour show about Al Davis and not mention Lamar Hunt. I mean,
they didn't mention Lamar Hunt at all.
They mentioned Stanley Laurel and not mention Oliver Hardy. I mean, they're linked. They're linked forever.
Yep. They didn't mention it at all. But
I'm excited about that book. You're excited about it, Frank, I know.
I'm excited about lips, too. If these lips could talk.
I'm excited about it. It was nice. Paul Verzi gave us a little jam last week and held it up and said he loved the book.
Yeah. He joins Johnny Bench and a lot of people who enjoyed the book. Jim O'Hare, Stephen Lang, they all enjoyed the book.
Well, Candace Bergman sent you a nice. Candace Bergen sent you a nice.
Oh man, here we go again.
You were going to lay into me with the Bergman thing.
I'm going to lay into you.
That's Ingmar Bergman, Candace Bergen. That's it. Now I got it.
Oh my God!
But yeah, she sent a nice couple of kudos, and it's always nice to have your work recognized, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's nice to get a kudo every now and then. We put a lot of effort into that book, and I'm proud of it.
Well, you know who got a nice kudo this week? Ted Cruz.
Every time I see Ted Cruz, every time I see his picture, the only thing I can think of is what Lindsey Graham said about him. He said Lindsey Graham said that Ted Cruz could get assassinated on the floor of the Senate, and not one senator would vote to convict.
That's true. That's true.
That's how loved Ted Cruz is.
Yeah, he was a subject of a really nice meme. Now you can put it up, Derek. Did you see that one?
No, but I love
it. Chris and Ted Cruz on a beach. Hilarious.
Those were remarkable. Those things are like, I don't know what the hell he was thinking. This guy's a really bright guy. I mean, you look at talk about an argument for not going to college. I mean, with the degrees this guy had, you'd think he'd be more.
Cruz, there's a difference between book smart and street smart. Cruz may be book smart, but he doesn't have 1 ounce of the intelligence that you have on the streets, that came from the streets, and that's how he makes the mistakes.
I'm trying to think of the columnist, the journalist, Tim Rush. Tim Russert? Is it Tim Russert? Tim
Russert.
Yeah. He said that when he first started working for Daniel Patrick Moynihan, he was intimidated because Moynihan had nothing but Ivy League guys all around him. And Moynihan grabbed him aside and said, let me tell you something. You can always learn what they know, but they can't learn in a million years what you know.
Yep.
And that's street smart. That's I know a guy, I swear to God, Frank, this guy I used to work with on the Teamsters when I first came back from Nam. I was delivering appliances for Sears. This guy, I don't think he even read a comic book. I don't think he could read a comic book. But boy, was he quick on the street. He could buy and sell you. I remember one time around Christmas time, we were down in Harlem early in the morning, about 10 o'clock, and this guy comes running up to the truck. We're stopped for a light, and he's got a bag with 2 bottles of Dewar's in it. And he says, hey, pal, it's Christmas time. You want to buy 2 bottles of Dewar's? So Patty Bondi was his name. He was on the outside. He says, how much? The guy says, $20. He says, look, 2 for 15. He's okay. So he gives him the $15. He takes the Dewar's, and truck pulls away. About 3 minutes later, he turns around to Lenny, the guy driving the truck, and he says, hey, Lenny, you know what? He says, I got plenty of Dewar's at home. He says, you want these 2 bottles of Dewar's? So Lenny goes, yeah, sure, it's Christmas time. He gives him the $15. So we get out to do a stop, and Lenny's not there. And I said to Patty, Patty, you drink Dewar's. Why did you give the 2 bottles to Lenny's? Because I looked in the rearview mirror, and I saw the guy running away. So I think it was full of iced tea. So I think it better let him get stunk than me. Now my reaction would have been to jump out of the truck and say, "Hey, stop!" But not Patty. He just shifted it over. He didn't blink. You know, I mean, that's street smart. That's the kind of smarts that he had.
Yeah, I don't think Ted Cruz has got an ounce of street smarts. I mean, he got elected twice, but that was Texas, and
Yeah, and Texas. I don't know if this is going to be an epiphany for Texas. I mean, I get conservative values. I swear to God, you never believe this, but when I was a young kid, 16, 15 years old, I worked for Buckley. I worked for William F. Buckley Jr. in New York. I was a big Goldwater guy. I was a huge Goldwater guy. AUH2O, when they smeared Goldwater with the little kid coming out with the daisy, remember that ad that the Democrats ran?
Yep.
And that was devastating. I mean, I think LBJ won 48 states.
He did.
I mean, they buried Goldwater. But there's nothing conservative about this Republican Party. There's nothing conservative about it. I don't know what they stand for anymore. I'm not sure they do. It's all about.
There's a fight within the Republican Party for control, as there is a fight within the Democratic Party. There's 4 factions here at work: 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, and it'll be interesting to see where it comes out in the next year.
And you make a good point. It's both parties. Of course, Biden's trying to stay towards the middle, try to be moderate. But there's a lot of people on the left wing that say he's not progressive enough, he's not liberal enough. And of course, in the right wing, you got the really extremists, and then you got the McConnell knows to win, you got to have candidates that can win the main election, not just the primaries.
Yeah.
And the more radical you are, you win the primaries. But then what happens when you go against the moderate guy and you want to get him in office? So, I mean, they're having a huge battle. And speaking of radicals, Rush Limbaugh died.
He did die. Well, what do you have to say about that?
Well, you know what? I obviously
just say what
Rush Limbaugh fan.
Just say what you said on Facebook.
Well, I was about to mention that. What I did was I put up a Facebook post when I heard that he died.
Derek, come back. Come back, Derek.
I'm back.
There you go. Yeah, there it is. So I had put up a Facebook post when I heard he died. Of course, I don't make fun of the dead. I mean, that's like the low way to go. But I mean, considering he lived his whole life spurting bile, I put up.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Something similar to what Twain did. I didn't wish him dead, but I sent a note that I approved. I put up. Well, Rush Limbaugh died, and I put underneath it: embalm, cremate, then bury, take no chances. And even my ex-wife chimed in and said, "That's mean," And
that's why she's your ex-wife. If she thought that was funny, she'd still be with you.
And I guess it is mean, but this guy was making $85 million a year.
Yeah, and let me tell you about that. He found an act that worked for him.
Exactly.
He found an act that worked for him, and as he got more and more approval for that act, he went deeper and deeper. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, you look at these people of political foes, and after, like Mary Madeline and James Carville, they were polar opposites, but then they got married. So they're just playing roles on TVs because they want to make a living. So and
$85 million a year is a pretty goddamn good living, right? And,
yeah.
And I even said to my ex-wife, I said, we raised 2 daughters together and a son. Well, a lot of it I was observing through heavy lenses, but nevertheless, we did raise 2 daughters and a son. And she was talking about how mean that was. And meanwhile, Limbaugh, when Clinton was in the White House, he said that he named the Clinton's cat, the name of his cat, whatever it was. And he said, and the new dog, the dog in the White House is Chelsea Clinton. And she was 13 years old when he said that on the radio. And when you talk about a 13-year-old girl and all the things they're going through with their body and their looks and their insecurities, and you consent around a 13-year-old. I think that's pretty mean. I think it's a lot meaner than what I said.
Yeah.
At least what I said was funny. And Bob cremate then bury, take no chances. Don't let that son of a bitch come back.
Where's Derek?
I'm
Stay
here.
on. Stay on.
I'm working on. Listen,
Okay.
listen,
Okay.
listen, listen, people, listen. Is there one good thing you could say about Rush Limbaugh?
Yeah, of course. There's always something you can find. For example, Rush Limbaugh, in my opinion, he didn't sweat much for a fat guy. That's pretty kind, isn't it?
Yeah. That implies.
I wonder who told Rush Limbaugh and Ted Cruz that they should grow beards.
Ah,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Maybe. Well, Ted Cruz, I think the beard ain't a bad idea. Matter of fact, if I was him, I'd grow my hair really long and comb it down in front of my face like Cousin It. I'd blow apart the whole persona. Because Cruz got a face like, there's an old Irish curse. And I quote it often because I love it. It says, God made you two-faced. And it's a good bloody thing he did, because the face you're wearing now looks like a madman's ass. And he has a face like a madman's ass. So he should do a Cousin It job. But the beard doesn't hurt him at all.
Yeah, but whatever about his face, his fucking brain is demented. How could he leave the people of Texas in a worse crisis they've had there in like 50, 60, 70 years and go to Cancun? Unbelievable.
The best was he blamed it on his kids.
I know. I thought.
And he threw his kids under the bus.
Unbelievable.
But they're actually doing an investigation now. What airlines was he flying? United Airlines? I think it was United.
Whatever.
But United Airlines is doing an investigation on who leaked that he was going to be on the plane.
I don't think anybody leaked it. Whoever, there were so many selfies going to Mexico that couldn't have been.
My question is, how come Ted Cruz is flying on United Airlines? Like, shouldn't he have a private plane?
No.
Why not?
Not yet. He hasn't stolen enough money. He hasn't embezzled enough money yet from the public to afford a private plane.
And you know what? And that's a both sides of the aisle thing there, boy. That's for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Who was it that said politics is the last refuge of a scoundrel? Boy, that is the truest thing ever said. I mean, look at it again. I hate to harp on the fact that we should have term limits and enough is enough. But Dianne Feinstein, she's 91 years old. Strom Thurmond was working. I mean, come on.
Is 91? Are you sure of that?
She's 91, Dianne Feinstein. Because I looked that up because I wanted to see who the oldest members of Congress was, because they're so out of touch. I mean, they're so out of touch with the majority of Americans. I mean, I don't know. The majority of Americans want a $15 an hour minimum wage. A majority of Americans want term limits. Good luck on that. You ain't getting term limits.
But I think there should be. I think there's something to say about somebody who's 91 years old, who's had experiences, and they know more things than the average person, let's say, that's 30, 40 years old, right? There needs to be balance. So I think that it's okay that she's still.
Age is fine. Go ahead, Frank. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say you have to have energy to do those jobs. Energy.
And as a 72-year-old man, who I'll be 73 in May, and I'm kind of manic, so I got a lot of energy. But I got to tell you, I see a difference. I see a big difference than when I was 53.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, because when I was Derek's age, I was still throwing myself around in the goal as a coach. Now I can't even think of throwing myself anywhere other than in bed.
Yeah, but those jobs are how
much energy or how little energy I'll have at 93. I will miss you very much when I'm 93, Billy. But
the best line I ever heard. The problem with age is, I mean, we obviously can't do what we used to do. Obviously. But we think, I had a girl come up to me one time. She was at my house, and she looked at a picture of me when I was 40 years old. And she said, "Is that you in the picture?" And I said, "What do you mean is that me? I still look like that. What are you talking about? But we think we can still do the things. So that's the danger with a politician. They're not going to admit that their powers of cognitive thinking are diminishing. Like the best line I ever heard about age was Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes says, "Your mind makes a date that your body can't keep."
Yeah.
That's what happens. 91, man. I mean, look, I've lost stuff in 20 years. I mean, and at 91, it's got to be worse because it's like stepping off a cliff, ain't it, Frank? I mean, you see you see the rapid decline, and you say to yourself, how could this be happening to me?
I know when Don Rickles was in his 80s, he used to have so much energy on stage. And his son, Larry, may he rest in peace, said, "My dad rests for 23 hours a day so he can be Don Rickles for 1 hour a night."
That's a hell of a quote.
Yep.
So he could be Don Rickles for 1 hour a night.
Yep.
And share that with the rest of us.
Yep.
Because he was a giant.
Yep.
An absolute giant.
So, Billy, I want to introduce a new segment to our show. Florida Man, or Florida Woman.
and indirectly, we're both Florida guys. You went to Jacksonville, I went to UF. We're both Florida guys.
So let's each week, I want to introduce one thing out of the news that we've heard that highlights a Florida man or a Florida woman. This week, we can talk about the Florida woman who was arrested after FBI agents called and asking about her visit to D.C. during the Capitol insurrection. She posted a video on Facebook and social media outlets threatening to kill them all while drinking Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire whiskey. Now, does that say anything? That's Florida Woman of the Week. And you're the person that ticked me off to Florida Man or Florida Woman. It really should become a staple of Nick a Mook and a Mike.
Yeah, I'm all Florida Man, Florida Man, Florida Man. When you Google Florida Man, pages come up. I mean, it's incredible. I tell you, the headline you just read is astonishing. My favorite Florida Man headline was they had Florida Man found with syringes in his rectum, claims he doesn't know how they got there. I can get, like, if you were driving and a cop pulled you over and they found a nickel bag of pot in your glove compartment, you say, "Look, I don't know how it got there. I'm innocent." But when you got 3 or 4 syringes jammed up your ass, I gotta feel like you know how they got there. I don't think you fell off a ladder or something like that.
I know some people who are that should have syringes shoved in their rectum. There's Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, and the 2 senators, Scott and Rubio. They should have shoved
Florida.
Wow.
Florida.
And I think you offended Derek.
No, I'm just.
Did you feel bad for the syringes or for the guys that were getting them up there? And you know what, man? I miss Florida. I mean, I really do. I mean, especially whenever it snows. I mean, you're down in Pasadena, so you're not getting the weather I am. But every now and then it's snowy and cold, and I'm saying, if it wasn't for this plague, I'd be on a plane. I'd be out of here. Because the beaches of Florida, especially St. Augustine, I've been all through Florida, and I love the Keys, and I love, I lived down there for 7, 8 years, not just going to school, but I lived down the Keys when I first retired. But not Ramrod, kid. Get that out of your head. I didn't live Ramrod, Key, Frank. And St. Augustine beaches, you can go for miles at St. Augustine and not even see another person on those beaches. They're beautiful, and that's the oldest city in America, St. Augustine.
It is indeed. It is.
Yep. I miss Florida, man. I miss the weather. I miss it's a little humid. When I first came out west, Frank, I went to Phoenix first before I came to California, and I was sitting on my balcony, and I think I was smoking a bong, as a matter of fact. And I was sitting on my balcony, overlooking the swimming pool of the place I rented, and It took me about 2 weeks. I said, "There's something wrong with this balcony," and I couldn't figure out what it was. And then I realized they had no screens. Because there's no mosquitoes in Arizona because there's hardly any water. And mosquitoes in Florida, if you don't have screens everywhere, you're
Yep,
doomed.
you're right.
Mosquitoes, especially after a hurricane, because
Yep.
they got all that stagnant water everywhere, and the mosquitoes just. One year, I actually went to Walmart. They had about 3 or 4 hurricanes in a row, and I went to Walmart because mosquitoes were like unbearable, and the whole aisle of DEET was empty. There wasn't a can of DEET anywhere in Walmart.
Wow.
So mosquitoes are a real jam. But I mean, I love Florida, the Keys especially. I like the Keys.
Except Daytona, where they can drive on the beach.
Yeah, yeah. Well, have
Now,
you ever been down to Key West, Frank?
you know I haven't been down to Key West. How many times have we had this conversation?
Hey, get out more, Frank. You gotta get out more. How about New Orleans? You ever down in New Orleans?
Absolutely. I've been-
Right. There you go. You know, the only difference between Bourbon Street and what the hell's the big street in Key West? I just had a 72-year-old brain fart. But the only difference is when you're on the strip in Key West and you're in a bar talking to girls or whatever, come 2 o'clock in the morning, everybody's got something to do. They're going to leave the bar and they say, "Well, I'm going parasailing in the morning. I'm going fishing. I'm going swimming. I'm
Duval.
going here. I'm going there." In New Orleans, no. New Orleans, it's 24-hour booze, man. I mean, that's it. Nobody's going anywhere because the bars are open 24 hours. And other than the fairgrounds, other than the racetrack, there ain't much else to do but drink and party.
Were you talking about Duval Street in Key West?
Yes, I'm sorry, Duval Street. Thank
Yeah.
you. That helps my 72-year-old brain. But Duval Street, one year, and again, it's a very scenic place, Key West, just like the French Quarter, you know. And there's a lot of gays in the French Quarter, and there's a lot of gays on Duval Street because it's so artsy, you know. It's a really artsy town, and of course, in New Orleans, if you're gay in Jackson, Mississippi, your father's shipping you out of town. I mean, he's not taking a rap for that. He's sending you to New Orleans. So there's a lot of gays, you know what I mean? But in Duval Street and in New Orleans, the big difference is 24 hours of booze. You know, I never been in a town where you can take a drink and walk into a bar with a drink like you can in New Orleans.
Wow.
You know what? I missed the point of that conversation I was doing when I was talking about the gays in Key West. When I was down at Duval Street, they have, you know, Mardi Gras, like a similar to Mardi Gras, and the mayor won the parade and dressed in a diaper.
Joe has joined.
Our guest today has umpired in the major leagues more years than any other umpire, and he's nearing nearly 31 games short of breaking Bill Clem's record of 5,369 games umpired. His colorful career has spanned 6 decades and 5 commissioners. It's our pleasure to welcome to the Mick, a Mook, and a Mike umpire Cowboy Joe West. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you guys.
You
Tell
bet.
you what, Rita and I have been talking about your book. So,
Oh, well, why don't you talk about it?
well, I think it's an amazing way you put it together, or you two guys, I said, should put it together because it was really unique. You told about everybody, and you were so humble in the way you presented this thing. I can't imagine. If you're going to write a book, I think that's the way to do it. And it's amazing how many people you cross paths with. And I know the stories about the Reggie Jackson. You know, I was in that movie with Reggie Jackson, and Rod Cruz' name came up the other day when I was talking to a guy named Paul Beast, and they asked him. He said, what would Rod Carew hit if they put the shift on? And I said, Rod Carew said he'd hit 900. And so it's so unique because we know so many of the same people. And of course, you and Rita go back long before I ever met you. But it's really nice to see Billy here. And I feel good here because as long as Billy's on this show with me, I won't be the ugliest guy on it.
Well, Joe, let me tell you something. It's a real pleasure for me to meet you. A real pleasure, man. The more research I did on you, the more I laughed. I mean, and your wife Rita, of course, was a racquetball champion. Is that right?
That's right.
When I read about your arm, man, you were quite a football player in your day.
Well, I had good teams, and as long as they give you the ball back in scoring position, you can do okay. I mean, I was very lucky. I think my senior year, I think we lost one game, and that was the national championship game to Abilene Christian, and they had a quarterback named Clint Longley, who was the
Wow.
mad bomber for the Dallas Cowboys a few years
Yeah.
later, and they had a running back named Wilbur Montgomery. And if you think he ran good against the NFL, you should have seen him run against us.
Well, Joe,
Wow.
I think we have a picture of you at Elon College. I think Derek can find a picture of you. I believe you at Elon in 1973.
Yeah, that's me.
We had 100 completed 132 or 255 yards for 18 touchdowns. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you got to remember back then, if you got a lead, you ran the ball. You didn't throw it anymore.
Yeah.
You ran the clock out. So
And,
I think the most passes I ever threw in a game was 31. They throw 31 and a quarter today.
Yeah.
absolutely right. You started at East Carolina, correct?
Right. Yeah. When my mother found out that the East Carolina football coach would pay for my meals, she said, "You will play football." She said, "Baseball's off the table. You will play football." So,
I'm going to tell you something that I may not have told you before, but I actually slept under the football stadium at East Carolina when I was in college because they had dormitories there, and when I was at Jacksonville, we played East Carolina in soccer, and they put us up under the football stadium in the dormitories under the stadium, deep in the bowels of that stadium.
yeah. The coolest thing about that stadium was they got the city to build it for them, and the payback was that they had to let the high school team play there. So I played high school football in that same stadium. And this was this big, I mean, people loved to come play Greenville Rose High School because we played in that big Ficklin Stadium. It was really neat. And then eventually they lost that right to play there. I don't know what the college did, but they took it away from the high school. But it had, it had the rounded center of the field, so it was drained well, and they had the
Yep.
Bermuda grass. You felt like you were walking on a carpet instead of a regular football stadium. And then when I transferred to Elon, because the coach that recruited me went to Duke, his name was Mike McGee.
And Mike McGee ultimately went up at USC, right? Southern
Right.
California.
He came to USC and later became the athletic director there. But when he went to Duke, I transferred to Elon because that was the other school that was recruiting me at the time, and they gave me a full scholarship too. Like I said, my mother said, as long as they pay for your meals, you can go.
You got to clear something up for me, Joe. Do you prefer Country Joe or Cowboy Joe or neither or just Joe?
Well, there's a guy called Country Joe and the Fish.
I remember them.
So it's probably better to call me Cowboy Joe because all the ball players do that anyway. It's kind of funny, and I got that nickname because I had that album back in the '80s. It was called Blue Cowboy, and I had sent a song to Merle Haggard's fiddle player, and he got it, and he said, if I give this to Merle and he cuts it, it'll be a B-side to a record because he didn't write it. And he said, so you should put it out as a novelty thing. And by the time he sent it back, I had written two more and arranged a couple more. And so we went in the studio and did a whole full-blown album. And it was really funny when we first put it on vinyl. We left off one of Merle Haggard's songs. We had a song on there called Sing Me Back Home that we did a cover on. And it was as good as anything we had on the album, but we had only played it as like a rhythm track. And when they got it and started to put it on the CD, the producer of the CD said, we need to put this on the album. I said, well, then go ahead. So we got one extra song that wasn't on the vinyl. But that was a great experience because I learned more about music in the studio with those professional musicians than some people can learn in years of going to school. I mean, just the way that they set up the tracks for everybody to play. When you go in the studio, there's a track for everybody. And later, I befriended a lot of musicians. I used to play golf with Glenn Campbell. Glenn was really funny.
Wow.
He would, and Glenn was a special musician because he couldn't read or write music as it's written as a score. He had to have his own marks on the chart. In fact, the time he recorded with Frank Sinatra, he had to be there when Frank sang because he couldn't read the charts.
Hey, Joe, let me stop you for a second because everybody knows that you're a great Major League Baseball umpire, but people may not realize what you're talking about. You have sang at the Grand Ole Opry, and you're a very renowned country music singer as well. So that's what I use
Joe, right? Two.
the word renowned loosely.
Let me see.
But
Let me see if I can find that song.
But
Yeah.
yeah, Joe wears many hats. He's also he was head of the union and an inventor, also an inventor.
Yeah.
The West Vest.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I invented that because I got tired of getting hurt.
So, Joe, how do you segue from football into umpiring?
Well, because the football coach at Elon wouldn't let me play on the spring football team for Elon, I used to go umpire the local high school games. And this guy saw me umpire a couple of high school games, and back then it was like $15 or $20 a game, which in the early '70s was a lot of money for a college kid. And so he saw me work, and he was the supervisor of umpires for the Carolina League. And he said, "If you're going to do this, you ought to learn how to do it right." And he took me to some clinics. And one of the funny things that no one ever thinks about is the umpire wears his mask, and when he takes his mask off, his hat can't come off because if your hat comes off, it might cover your eyes. You miss the play at home plate. So one of the first things he taught me was how to take my mask off without my hat coming off. Now I've been umpiring in the major leagues for this will be 43 years, and my hat's never come off because of what he taught me when I was umpiring high school games.
Wow.
And he prepared me for umpire school by giving me tests that they gave their umpires back in the Carolina League. And when I went to umpire school, I was way ahead of the kids that were just starting out. And I started my first camp was in Lakeland, Florida, with the Tigers, and Steve Ripley and I were in the same camp. And 4 years later, I was in the big leagues, and 4 years after that, he was in the big leagues. And one of the cutest stories about my umpiring career was when I was 15. I played on a teener league team, which was ages 13 through 15. And the last game we played in Easton, Pennsylvania, the plate umpire was Frank Pulley. And 8 years later, I was umpiring in the major leagues with Frank Pulley.
So, how old were you by the time you broke in? We were 28. You must have been maybe 28, 26, 28 years old in the major leagues?
My first game in the big leagues, I was 23.
Wow.
Yeah, but I only had 8 games that year. The next year, I had 48 games, and when I was 25, I was full time.
Okay, so what year was that?
76 was my first games.
76. So when you were, I think Hank Aaron was still around then, right?
Hank Aaron was just finishing.
Yeah. So how do the old veterans respond to a 23-year-old umpire who was wet behind the ears?
Well, that's a funny story because when I went up to work in Atlanta in 77, no, it was 78. It was my third time I'd come up. John Kibler, the crew chief, walked over because back then the players wanted to know your name. They wanted to know what your personality was like. They were interested in, could you talk to the guy? Could you not talk to the guy? So I'm working third base, and John Kibler walks over and he says, "Did you kick out 50 players in the minor leagues last year?" And I went, "No." He said, "Well, they think you did, so don't tell them any different."
23 years old, Joe. Is that some kind of a record? I mean, has there anybody been younger that ever broke into the major leagues as an umpire?
I don't know if they've been younger, but I know that Jimmy Evans and Lee Wire umpired when they were 23. And again, they weren't full time at the time. But yeah, 23 is about as early as it could get.
Wow.
Well, from what I read, you graduated top of the class when you went to umpire school, but you said you had a head start.
Well,
that before you got there.
That wasn't really fair. I mean, those kids didn't have a chance because I was umpiring like a guy in the Carolina League, which was the fastest A league in baseball at the time. It may still be, and I had great tutelage. I had people that helped me before I even got to umpire school. So
well, What are some stories that you have from the major league, from your 41 years in the majors, that
43.
43, that you come quickly come to your mind? I know the David Ortiz story. So why don't you tell that one?
Well, that was kind of mean of me to pick on him like that. When he came to the big leagues, he was a twin, and he's in spring training over here at Tinker Field in Orlando, and they brought him in as the defensive replacement in the bottom of the ninth inning. And of course, he threw the ball around to the other infielders. And when he finished, he threw the ball in the dugout, and he looked up and kind of nodded. And I said, I hope you play in this league a long time. And he says in his broken English, thank you very much. I said, because as long as you're in this league, I won't be the ugliest guy in it. Now, he kind of shunned it off, and I don't think I spoke to him until he was a Red Sox again, right? So the last year he played for the Red Sox, he came to bat. And I had already had an incident with Major League Baseball about saying the Yankees and the Red Sox take too long between games. And they had made that a national story that I picked on them. And I didn't really pick on them. I just told the truth that they weren't playing like the commissioner wanted them to play. And so he comes to bat and he says, I have to tell you something. And I said, no, I'll get in the box. I don't want to hear it. He said, no, I have to tell you something. I said, I don't want to hear it. Get in the box. And then he said, just one thing. I said, okay, one thing. And he said, I'm retiring. Now I'm getting mad because he's taking too long. I said, I don't care if you retire. Get in the box. He said, just one thing. I said, okay. He said, next year, you be the ugliest guy in the league. I remember after all those years.
And 18 years later, he remembered?
Yeah.
That's a big story.
Tell us the story about Alex Rodriguez with the Red Sox and the Yankees when you made the call that the Red Sox pulled their team off the field and they had to put police presence all over the field.
Well, that was when he slapped at the glove with his left hand. You can't reach out with your hands and interfere with somebody trying to tag it. You can slide into them, you can run over them, but you can't reach out with your hand and interfere. And that's what he did at first base. And there was so much going on at first base. The first base umpire, when he saw the ball come loose, he just signaled safe. So the Red Sox started out of the dugout to argue, and we knew that the first base umpire didn't see what happened. So I went down there from home plate. The right field umpire came in from right field, and it's the kind of thing where you try to give everybody information. You can't change their call. Had he not called anything, we could have called interference from another position, but he called safe. So we went up and said, did you see him reach out with his bare hand for the ball? And of course he said no. So we explained to him that we're going to have to call this guy out. And of course Jeter scored on the play because the ball got away, went into right field. And Rodriguez ends up on second base. And sure enough, we tell Randy what happened. We got the whole crew together. And the funny thing was that only the right field umpire and myself noticed it because the second base umpire was looking at the guy touch the base. The third base umpire was worried about something else, and the outfield umpire was the one guy coming in from right field. So we said, you're going to have to change it, and I actually told the guy, I said, you want me to call it? He says, no, it's my call. And so we started to turn around, and I said, just a minute, because when you change this, they're going to throw everything in the world at us.
And this is in the Bronx, right? This is happening in Yankee Stadium?
It was in Yankee Stadium.
Whoa.
So he said, okay, I know. When he turned around and called him out, they threw stuff on the field that you would let. Somebody threw their BMW car keys at the third base umpire.
Wow.
Yeah. And I told John Hirschberg, I said, we should go in the parking lot, see if we can find it.
Well, on that note, I got to ask you, I'm a Bronx guy. I grew up in the Bronx. And
well, hold, just a minute. You can say you got older there. I would never say that you grew up there.
You're right. But I keep my shoes on, so I fool a lot of people. I don't know for the Bronx, But I got to ask you, is that the worst environment? Is Yankee Stadium like in a playoff game one of the most hostile environments? Or have you been in stadiums that are worse?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're Philadelphia, Boston, New York. They can be the tough. I tell you what, I had to kick Andre Dawson out of a game when he was a Cub. And I tell people when I did that, I sold more beer than the Cubs sold in 2 weeks because they threw every beer that was in the stands. But, yeah, those are three of the toughest cities for being ruthless and yelling at officials and stuff. And but you know what? They're also very up to date on what's going on. They yell at their players as well as the umpires. It's not. They don't. I mean, if you play in New York, you better be good. And if you're not good, they will tell you quickly. And the same's true in Philadelphia and Boston. And it's kind of funny because all three stadiums are different. The Bronx Zoo, they used to call it when it was Old Yankee Stadium. That was really something I'll never forget. One day, and Greg Nettles used to play for the Yankees, and then he got traded to the Padres late in his career. And one day we're standing by third base, and it's the seventh inning stretch, and Harry Carey gets up to sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And he used to always do that with a microphone. He'd go 1 and a 2, and then he'd start singing. And he started singing this day, and, and Greg Nettles says, "That's terrible." And I said, "You can't say that." He said, "Why can't I?" I said, "Because he sings in front of more people than Alabama does."
Yep. Hey, country music. Why don't you tell me the story about you and Garth Brooks?
Well, I met Garth at Roy Acuff's funeral. I went to Roy Acuff's, it was a memorial service because Roy had himself buried before anybody knew he was dead. True story. He said in his will he wanted to be buried immediately, and no one knew about it till he was already in the ground. And Roy he ran the Grand Ole Opry back when I first went there, and he was a big baseball fan. In fact, I have a picture over here on the wall. Boxcar Willie took me to his locker room at the Grand Ole Opry, and being the novice that I was, I took him a copy of my album. When I got there, the little attendant said, "Oh, you can't take albums in there. Mr. Acuff refuses to accept albums." And well, I didn't know what to do with it, so I walked in with it and I handed it to him, and he took it and he put it on his wall. I had the only vinyl album that was ever in Roy Acuff's locker room at the Grand Ole Opry, and I have a picture of it over here on the wall. But he was such a sweetheart. But I met Garth at Roy Acuff's funeral, and then years later, Garth wanted to go play baseball, which he knew he was never going to be a big leaguer. But he went to spring training with the San Diego Padres. And he
was never going to be a big leaguer?
Well, he was never going to be a big leaguer, and he knew that. But he would go and he would go through the drills, and he would work out with the team and everything. And this one day, Bruce Bochy put him in the game as a pinch runner. Well, the first base umpire was Eddie Montague. And the left-handed pitcher made one of his quick moves over the first base, and he picked Garth off the width of his table. I mean, he was out from here to Rocky Mount, Of course, Mark Grace tagged him, and everybody knew he was out. And Eddie Montague goes, "Safe!" And, of course, Mark Grace started laughing. And Garth Brooks got up and hugged the umpire, Eddie Montague, right? So after the game, it was, kind of in fun. It was a spring training game. After the game, the reporters went to the umpire's locker room. They said, "Mr. Montague, it appeared that the throw might have beaten Garth Brooks to first base." And Eddie Montague says, "I can call out Barry Bonds, and I can call out Mark Grace. But if I call Garth Brooks out, I can't go home." So,
it appears he might have been out. It appears. So you're also the head of the union, I understand. Are you still the head of the union? Or
no, I gave that up. But they know I'm going to retire in a little while, so I had to give it to somebody who could be there for longevity. So I'm not the head of the union anymore.
But there's 2 albums, is that correct? 2 country albums. You were the head of the union. You were an inventor. I mean, the West Vest. So,
well, my second album is a storybook album. It tells baseball stories, and one of the stories in there is the story that Frank's friend Johnny Bench tells on himself all the time, and I think I know it. The story's in Frank's book because I saw it. But Johnny, and it's really funny. I got close to Johnny when I started playing on that celebrity golf tour, and I think the only reason they invited me to play on it was so I could refute some of the stories that Johnny and Mike Schmidt told. But anyway, Johnny used to tell this story on himself, and he was a hot shot rookie coming up, and he was, I think he was in his early 20s. He might have just been 20 when he first came up. He was throwing guys out from his knees. He's on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and he's the next thing since sliced bread. And sure enough, he comes to the big leagues. And Cincinnati used to be the only game that was played on opening day, and he got a couple hits in the first game. Well, the second game was 2 days later because that was a rain day. They would schedule it off in case they were rained out. So the third day he gets another hit. The fourth day, the third game, he gets 2 more hits. So he's got 5 hits going into the weekend, and they're traveling to St. Louis. And you got to remember that when Johnny was a little boy, there was only one game of the week on TV. And his dad used to make him watch it. And his dad would walk by the TV, and didn't matter who was pitching, he'd say, I can hit this guy. I can hit this guy. So sure enough, the inning would end, and new pitcher would come in, and his dad would walk by the TV screen again. He'd say, I can hit this guy. I can hit this guy. So Johnny grew up thinking his dad could hit anybody. Well, when he opened in St. Louis, the pitcher on the mound was a guy named Bob Gibson. So the first pitch, Johnny said, it got on me so fast I just flinched. He said, I didn't even react. Like, second pitch was inside corner, strike 2, and I flinched again. The third pitch he knew I was bailing out, so he threw me a slider on the outside. Go strike 3. I'm walking back to the dugout. I hadn't taken the bat off my shoulder, and I'm laughing. And I think his manager at the time was Fred Hutchinson, and Fred was a mean, tough guy. And Fred said, what's so damn funny, Bench? And Johnny said, I don't believe Dad can hit this guy.
Gibson was an assassin. He was unbelievable.
So
Yeah.
I had it was about 2 years ago. I'm in Nashville visiting the Hobbs family. And I was there with another umpire named Ted Barrett. And Ted asked me if I knew Larry Gatlin. And I said, yeah. He said, well, Larry and I have a mutual friend who's a piano player, he's a gospel piano player. He said, would you call him and see if I can say hello? So I called Larry, told him. And Larry says, I'll meet you for lunch. I'll meet you at John Hobbs' place up there by the old Opryland Hotel. And so he came by, and I knew that Larry was great friends with Bench. And when I brought up Bench's name, he said, you know, we were at the World Series game when they had the earthquake. And Johnny was doing stuff for television or radio or something, and says, when earthquake hit, there's people running into the lobby as they get their stuff, you know. Of course, the earthquake hit when they were at the ballpark. And he said, here we are in the lobby grabbing our things and trying to get everything. And there's Johnny Bench with a set of golf clubs over his shoulder. So he said Johnny was more worried about his golf clubs than anything else. Right? So, of course, he told me and Teddy that story. And I said, well, did Johnny ever tell you the story about his first time against Bob Gibson? He said, no. So he got his phone and he picked it up and he showed me it said JB on his phone. He hit the button and he called Bench and he says, there's a guy here telling me about your first at bat against against Bob Gibson. And he said, well, let me tell you about it. And he told that story just like I told you just now. And Larry Gatlin said, that's exactly what the guy said. He said, well, who is it? And Larry said, it's Joe West. He said, well, that SOB might have been there.
That's pretty funny. Hey, Joe, what do you think about the lack of replays? That's sort of cut into your arguments during games. Haven't it?
You know what's really funny? When they put in replay, I thought all the arguments would go away. Well, the first year we had replay where you could go to the headsets and say out or safe or whatever. The first replay was actually on boundary balls, home run balls, or fair and foul. But when we first put in the full-blown replay where they could check a replay at second base or first base, I figured we wouldn't have any arguments whatsoever. Ejections went up 30%.
Wow.
30%. Because they were arguing with the replay. How do you argue with the replay? And when you argue with the replay, it's an automatic ejection, you know. And I mean, it was hilarious. Ejections went up 30% when we put in replay. Well, baseball couldn't figure that out either. But it was really funny. But the thing I like about replay is all our umpires, young and old, go in and get to witness positioning stuff. It's like an on-the-job training. It's actually very good for the umpires, and it's helped a lot of our umpires improve their work. It's like a doctor going to a seminar or a dentist going to a seminar. It's good for us. And you know what? At the end of the day, the third base umpire didn't lose the game for the Oakland A's.
Right.
Or the first base umpire didn't lose the game.
Right.
San Diego. So I think it's been good for baseball, and it created 8 new jobs because when I negotiated it with Rob Manfred, he said, "I'll give you 2 guys to do replay." I said, "Rob, 2 guys can't watch 15 games. Can't do it." I said, "You can't even watch one."
You know, as a layman, I got to tell you, I think the replay is a testament to how good the umpires are.
Oh, it has proved how good we are. And I've said this before. They spent $45 million to prove that we're 99% right on the bases. Now, behind home plate, they have these machines that are grading us now to within a quarter of an inch. And all of our guys are scoring better than 95% on pitches, too.
So then why are they considering a virtual ump behind the plate?
Well, they're getting that from the media. They know that there's nothing that could. I mean, what do you do on the 6 pitches that machine misses that doesn't call anything? What are you going to do with those?
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. It's not that the machine's not good, because the machine is good, but so are we, you know. And with the proper training, these guys that are working home plate get to be 95, 96, 97. We have guys that have 100% in a lot of our games, and but they don't publicize that because it's not news, you know. And it's kind of funny. If an umpire has a great game, no one says a word.
No.
I mean, your greatest compliment is the losing pitcher walking off the field and saying, "Good job, thank you," because all your partners know what you're going through.
Well, let me ask you. That brings up a question. You know, there's a number of courtesies that you guys do when you rush the home plate. You never turn your butt toward the fans. You give the catcher a little bit extra time when he gets hit with a foul ball. Little things like that people don't notice. What are some of the other things that you can tell our viewers?
Well, we would never want to put anybody in position or harm's way to get hurt. Like if somebody's ejected and you got to bring a pitcher in, you give them as many pitches as they want. And there'll be times when it's cold weather early in the season, and the pitcher will say, "Can I get a couple more?" And you're not going to put him in jeopardy. I mean, you would never want to do that. And as much as they look at us as a dictator or the Gestapo, you got to realize that, you know, we're part of the band. I look at the umpire as the bass player or the drummer, and the players are the singers and the entertainers. They really are. I mean, I told people lots of times, I said, an umpire is pretty much like an offensive lineman. You don't notice them until somebody gets tackled in the backfield. And it's true. I mean, and the biggest thing, because I played on great football teams and I played on great baseball teams, the biggest thing you don't get as an umpire is you never win. You don't get the satisfaction of winning anything. When you come off the field and your partners come up and say, "Great job." I mean, and very seldom does anyone from the office call you and tell you did a good job, because that's what's expected. And when a ball player makes a great play, they're patting him on the back in the dugout. When an umpire makes a great call, they go, "Well, he should have done that. That's what he's getting paid."
Yeah. Well, they only notice you if you make a mistake, if they think you made a mistake.
Yeah.
Can I also say that people don't realize that you guys don't have a home field? You don't play half of your games at home. you play all your games on the road.
Yeah.
So you guys are on the road constantly, and that's got to be a wear and tear as well.
Oh yeah, that's about the last 3 weeks of the season. You're looking at the area code on the phone in the hotel and know where you are because you're moving all the time. But that's part of the job, and we've gotten it better. When I started, there was no time off, there was no replay, so we were working 162 games a year. And in '79, we had an umpire strike because we knew that it cost over $100 some odd in per diem on the road, and we were only getting 50. So we had a individual strike because we had year-to-year contracts. So baseball came to us and they offered us 90. We knew it cost $108 to $110, but because they doubled the money, we took it to go back to work. And we were out till May 18th. And the funny thing was, it was guys like Rod Carew and Reggie Jackson and Tom Seaver that brought us back to work because they said, we're tired of this. We don't want amateurs working our games anymore. But they actually settled the strike. It wasn't the umpires and it wasn't the lawyers. It was guys like Seaver and Reggie that settled it.
Well, let's talk about the length of games. The last time I saw you umpire a game in person, I was in New York on Memorial Day, 2018. It was 101 degrees, and you were behind the plate. And the game was over in 2 hours and 40 seconds. And then I went out. 2 hours and 40 seconds. Yeah. So after the game, I went down. I said, I knew the answer to this. I said, Joe, what was the best thing about that game? What did you say?
Well, it was 2 hours and so many minutes. My first game in the major leagues behind the plate was an hour and 54 minutes.
Yeah.
I had Phil Necro and Joaquin Andujar. One of them was throwing gasoline, the other one was throwing butterflies.
Yep.
But they hit the ball and they threw strikes. And if you look at the pitchers there, I remember talking to Jim Palmer one day. He was talking to some young pitchers with the Orioles, and Jim still does the color for the Baltimore Orioles. And I was walking by and he stopped me and he says, Joe, he says, what do you think of a pitch count? And you have to remember when he pitched for Weaver didn't have a pitch count. I mean, Mike Cuellar and those guys, they throw 200 pitches in a game. And so he asked me, he said, what do you think of a pitch count? And I said, well, give me a number. He said 110. I said, if Tom Seaver was pitching and he threw 110 pitches, we'd be in the 11th inning. And that's why Tom Seaver was as good as he is. That's why Steve Carlton was as good as he is. I mean, great pitchers go after the hitters. They don't mess around. And here's another thing. You talk about speed of the game. I made this statement to Mr. Beeston the other day, too. He was talking about the DH. Why don't they have the DH in both leagues? And I said, why don't you take the DH out of the other league? And he said, why would we do that? The players won't let us. And I said, you should give them 2 more roster spots because those 2 roster spots will be cheaper than the DH. And if you get rid of the DH, the game will speed up. Because if you watch the National League play, the National League, when they get to the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter, they go right after the hitters because they know the pitcher's the 9th hitter. In the American League, they pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter like it's Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, and Jimmy Fox.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference. That's why the National League games played a little bit faster than the American League game because those last 3 hitters, the pitchers are going after them. Doing everything they can to speed up the game.
You talk about not going after the hitters. Rod always said to me, he said, I don't understand why there's so many 0-2 counts that become 3-2 counts. It used to be that pitcher, if you went to an 0-2 count, you may waste a pitch, but you may waste a pitch close enough to be a strike, and then you go after the guy the next pitch. Now. It's amazing how many 0-2 pitches become 3-2 counts.
Well, not only that, back when he played, the pitchers were taught to throw low strikes. Today, with their acceleration and the speed that they throw the ball, they're teaching these kids to try to get guys out high in the strike zone.
Yeah.
Well, back when he played, if you threw pitches high in the strike zone, these big power hitters would knock it out. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
So in 42 years, have you seen that kind of difference? You think I mean, not on an individual thing. Of course, a guy like Gibson or Seaver, but in general, do you think that the athletes are bigger and stronger now than they were back in the day?
Al Barlick, the old umpire, told me one day, and I agree with him. The player today is bigger and faster, mainly because he's training year round. But he's not better. You know what I'm saying? There are not any Willie Mays out there. There's no Roberto Clemente's. Hank Aaron just passed away. One of the funniest things Hank Aaron ever said, he said, "It took me 23 years to get 3,900 hits. It took me one day on the golf course to do that."
On holes.
Yeah, but you look at these guys, and there was a center fielder for the Phillies. His name was Richie Ashburn. Remember the name? He
Sure.
became an announcer. And Richie Ashburn was a 300 hitter. He was a quality defensive player. But it took him 20 years to get in the Hall of Fame. And the reason it took him 20 years is because they were comparing him to Mays and Mantle and Clemente and Aaron. Richie Ashburn was a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
But and I'll give you another guy that probably will never go. Roger Maris was a Hall of Famer, but they're comparing him to those kind of guys, and that's not fair.
Well, same thing in Brooklyn in the 50s. They had Duke Snider. You didn't even mention Duke in the list of great center fielders in New York because they had Willie, they had Mickey, and they had the Duke. And there was some argument as to who was the best amongst the three of them because Duke was a great Hall of Fame.
He was a great player, yeah, and that's not fair. I didn't mean to slight Duke. I'm sorry.
Well, I understand that actually Duke Snider, it's a trivia question, that Duke Snider hit more home runs than anybody in the major leagues between 1950 and 1960 in those 10 years. He had more home runs. Well, of course, Mays missed a couple of years in the service, and Mantle hurt his knee and everything, but Snider had the most home runs in that 10-year period.
Well, and you're leaving another guy out, Stan Musial.
Oh,
man.
What was his lifetime average? 321?
I think it was higher than that. I think it was 3.
What's his name?
Whatever it was. Stan Musial.
Yeah, Musiiel. I think that Stan Musial was, well, there's no doubt that he was every bit the hitter that Ted Williams was, but Ted merchandised himself better than anybody else because he said, whenever I walk the streets, I want somebody to say there's the best hitter that ever lived. So that was self-perpetuating. But Stan Musial was a phenomenal baseball player, and he was even a better man. He was a harmonica player. He was a pitcher. He pitched in the major leagues. He was a great player, and he was a brilliant player. And he's just lost. And it's a shame that he is paled in comparison to Ted Williams because I think he was every bit the player that Ted Williams was, and he was twice the person that Ted Williams was.
331.
331 lifetime. Wow.
All right. Well, here's the uniqueness of that 331. He was 331 in day games, 331 in night games.
Yes, sir.
He was 321 or 331 in road games, 331 home games.
That's phenomenal.
He was also 331 against left-handed pitching and 331 against right-handed pitching. Most consistent.
Unbelievable. That's
now, I talked to Mike Shannon one day, and he brought his name up. Mike Shannon's the announcer for the Cardinals. He said, this guy, you pick up his bat, it had one spot on it, and it was on the sweet spot where he hit it.
Yep.
He said, you pick up my bat, it had marks all over it because I got jammed. I hit the ball off the end of the bat. He said, this guy used the same bat all year. Never break the bat. Mm-hmm. He said it was phenomenal. He said, I don't hit with golf club. I can't hit the ball square every time. And this guy hit it with a baseball bat and it was moving.
Yeah. And the ball's going 90 miles an hour. Do you think it's because of the market? Because St. Louis, that he doesn't get his due because it was a smaller market, or?
Well, and he wasn't flashy like Mays, and he didn't hit all the home runs. He hit more doubles than everybody else, and he hit line drives. That's the amazing thing about Aaron. Aaron didn't hit those mammoth home runs. Aaron hit them where they just go over the fence. And Aaron never hit 50 home runs in a year. Never. And he had the most home runs of anybody.
Yeah,
He
but
never,
he hit the hardest ball I've ever seen in person. It was 1973. It was in Atlanta. It was the first or second game of the playoff series with the Mets. He hit a rope down the left field line. I swear to God, it was out. It was out before he hit it. I mean, it was so hard. It was hit like a line drive. You know the way that Billy Casper used to hit drives like that. Billy Casper was a great golfer in the '70s, but it just tailed. It was out before he hit it. It was unbelievable how hard he hit.
but see, Aaron didn't get his credit because he wasn't flashy like Mays.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
well, I had read one time that Mays and DiMaggio, the difference between the two of them was DiMaggio made a hard catch look easy, and Mays made a hard catch look hard. And I was a big Willie Mays fan. I mean, I was a Giant fan growing up. I grew up in the Bronx when the Giants were still in New York, and I hated the Yankees because they were always winning, and all my friends were Yankee fans, so I just hated the Yankees. You know, I was a big Giant fan, and
Joe, you need how many games you need to break the record?
I think it's 31.
31. And then after you break the record, will you come back next season, or is that still to be determined?
I think that would be determined later. I'd like to get this out of the way and then kind of settle down, so it's not.
well, your record will never be broken. That's what most people say. If when you do get the record, and I hope it comes this year. Of course, I hope you stay healthy enough. But they say it'll never be broken. I mean, that's the record that's going to stand longer than Lou Gehrig's Iron Horse or whatever, or any record. I mean, it's just not going to be broken.
Yeah, but speaking of Lou Gehrig's record, that was broken.
Was broken. Yeah, it was broken by the Orioles. Yeah, I know.
But I wore this top for you, so
You're-
you're going to go in, right, Joe?
I'm a long way from that.
well, there's a great quote you made about blown call. And you said there's only three ways an umpire can blow a call. You said lack of concentration, lack of positioning, or lack of timing.
Yeah.
Was that something you picked up in umpire school? Or is that you?
Actually, I got that from that old teacher, and he was the lack of positioning happens all the time. Sometimes the player takes you out of position. Lack of concentration. If you're not paying attention to what you're doing, you got a chance of missing something. But timing is something that umpires have to work on because the reaction to a pitch or a play can't be instantaneous. You have to be like a judge and take all the evidence in that you can gather and then make the call. If you notice how the umpire takes a little while to make a call, the announcers want that call right now. So they're saying, what took him so long? What took him so long was he had to make sure the player held the ball, to make sure the guy stayed on the base, and all this stuff that to us seems trivial, but to the announcer, well, why didn't he make that call? And I remember Vince Scully picked on me one day because I would take a little bit longer than the average guy to call strikes. And he said, well, you're getting to be like Getz and Pelakudis. And I said, thank you. He said, what does that mean? I said, well, Larry Getz and Chris Pelakudis are great umpires. So thank you very much. And I used to wave at Vince up in the press box. Whenever we walked the home plate, he would always wave back. He was very gracious. But Vince hated it when he would call the pitch and think it was a ball, and then the umpire would say strike. And then he'd go look at the replay and say, well, he probably was right. But Vince was very good with us. And I'll tell you another one was Ernie Harwell, Jack Buck, and even when you got Harry Carey away from the microphone, he was a very gracious individual. He was very giving, good guy. There's a guy with Tampa Bay, Dwayne Stats. You look at these guys, and they get to announce games, and they're part of the history of the game, which is on that one of those albums I did. Baseball is like a family. There's the announcer, there's the television people, there's the bat boy, there's the ball players, there's the umpire, there's the person that runs the balls down and left. They're all like a family, and everybody has a little job to do. And the coolest thing about this job is that you're witnessing a piece of history every day.
Yeah.
Some days the history's a little bigger than others. And
Well,
I mean,
you talk about that. I've been to one game in Wrigley Field, and it was 1975 when I was working in the World Football League. The Chicago Winds had just folded. The game I went to, because I was interviewing with the Cubs for a PR position, the game I went to, Rennie Stennett went 7 for 7. That was the only game ever that anybody in Major League history went 7 for 7.
yeah,
And just talk about how random the game can be. Anything can happen on any day.
yeah. And I was at first base for Nolan Ryan's 5th no-hitter. I was behind the plate for Willie McCovey's 500th home run. And the only reason I know that is because they put it on the scoreboard after he hit it.
That's your first game?
No. My first game was in Atlanta with the Astros and the Braves. And but I mean, there have been numerous times you end up watching a piece of history and you don't know how big it is till it's over. I only had one no hitter behind the plate. That was Clay Buchholz, and that was in Boston. And you know, and then you look around and see guys every now and then. We go to Dodger Stadium and there's Sandy Koufax sitting over there. And here's a guy that Frank Robinson told the Orioles when they were going to face him in the World Series. They said, "What is this Koufax like?" And Robinson said, "Like nothing you've ever seen in your life."
Wow. Wow. Well, what about the stadiums themselves? You know, I was a fireman in the Bronx, Joe, and we used to have bus trips every week, every month or so. We'd go around to different stadiums, to Baltimore, to Chicago, to Boston, you know, just to get on the road and see it. And to a man, everybody seemed to think Wrigley Field was the best place to see a game. Do you have any favorite stadium that you just think for the history of the game or for the?
Well, as far as nostalgia and everything, places like Boston and Wrigley Field would be good, but those places for us are tough because we have so many different ground rules. We have the ivy, we have the nets, so they're not conducive to be friendly to umpires. Whereas stadiums like Dodger Stadium, which was built just for baseball, is more that I would say is the best ball, and it's one of our oldest parks. I would say Dodger Stadium is the best ballpark that we have. Now, I'd get a lot of pushback from that because people like the things that happen in the newest ballpark, but Dodger Stadium for working on the field is awesome, and you couldn't find anything about it. Of course, I like Toronto to work on the field because it's symmetrical. But then Toronto has more ground rules than Dodger Stadium because in the left field corner, the fans can interfere with the game. And I was always baffled by why you would rebuild Yankee Stadium and still make it where a 13-year-old could interfere with the game. In fact, Cito Gaston came out and asked me to go to replay on a ball that was hitting right field. I said, you know what? They spent this kind of money to rebuild this place, and a 13-year-old can still interfere with the game. So I'm going to go look for it. And but we didn't change it.
But that's something only an umpire would look at. I mean, when you're watching a baseball game, and I watch it, but I'm sure we're watching two different games entirely. I mean, as a pro for 42 years, you're watching a different game altogether.
Well, actually, and you have to respect the fact that I've got to be there for 9 innings, which is why I don't really care for spring training, because in the third inning, all the big leaguers are gone. So I'm not, when they call me and say, how many games you want to work in spring training? I say, I don't want to work any. I don't. But the coolest thing is going back to the history of the game, and you're a piece of history. And I can never, I'll never forget this. I was working, it was the off season. It was a basketball season. I got invited to the Philadelphia Sports Writers dinner. And I can honestly brag about this. I'm the only umpire that's ever been invited back twice. Evidently, the other guys ate and drank too much. But anyway, Charles Barkley came down from New York. He was still playing at the time. And this is something that I cherish, because Harry Callis and I took him aside because he had made the statement that I don't want to be a role model. And he was still playing in the NBA. And we took him aside and said, Charles, whether you like it or not, you're a role model. It's how well you want them to perceive you is the difference. Because you don't have a choice. You're a role model whether you like it or not. And you have to understand that being an umpire is the same thing. You can't lose your cool. You can't lose your temper. You may have to kick somebody out of the game, but that's part of your job. You know, that's like a police officer might have to arrest somebody. That's part of his job. But you're a role model to these people too, no matter whether you like it or not. And so I see him now doing his stuff on TV. And Larry Ziegler and I play a lot of golf together. Larry goes to these events with him where Charles comes and talks to the local kids. And Larry says he's so good with them now, you wouldn't know it's the same guy.
Mhm. Wow.
He talks to them about getting an education. He said, you're not going to be able to do what I've done in my life. You're not going to be an NBA player. And if you're not going to be an NBA player, you better be smart and you better have something to fall back on. He said, and even if you are an NBA player, you think you can play as long as I did, you're going to have to learn a trade. You're going to have to learn to do something. And we don't teach our kids that. And there's hero worship, and then there's worshiping people for the wrong reason. But he's been very good, and I'm glad to call him a friend. And he's really something, because he gets on the air with those other announcers. He doesn't care what he says. He says what he believes.
Yeah.
So before we go, you also we talked about your career as an umpire. We talked about your career as a country singer, but also you have a noted career as an actor. Why don't the little story about your Naked Gun appearance and what happened afterwards on an airplane?
Well, yeah, that's a cute story. I was the third base umpire in the Naked Gun because Lee Wire couldn't do it. He had a crew chief meeting. So Lee Wire called Eddie Montague, another umpire. And Eddie wasn't going to do it because you had to be 3 weeks in LA. So when they called me, they said they were going to give me, I don't know, $1,000. I said, $1,000 a week? And they said, yeah. I said, plus expenses? Oh, no, it's a day actor. I said, I can't do it. So they called back, and I didn't realize this till later. They offered me $3,000 to come do the thing. So I'm going to get $3,000 a week. Okay, that'll pay my expenses. That'll pay for me to go out there, come back, and I'll still pocket some money, right? So when I get there, the first day, they are rehearsing Frank Drebin's singing of the national anthem. When I pull up in the parking lot, I'm going, oh my word, what did I get into? This is so, and they needed you for 3 weeks, mainly for the background scenes. Because when we went to shoot what we were going to shoot, our vocals, it only took like 5 minutes. And the first base umpire was a guy named Hank Robinson. And he was Lorne Green's double at Bonanza. If you ever saw Lorne Green on a horse, it was this guy. Gray hair, looked just like Lorne Green. And he was the umpire in Angels in the Outfield. He was behind the plate in every game in Angels in the Outfield. He was the umpire in Hollywood. His name was Hank Robinson.
Yeah, and he was in Bay City Blues also, because when I did Bay City Blues, he was one of the guys I called, Hank Robinson.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's in the locker room one day, and I got him to open the locker room like the third day, and we would play gin until they needed us. I was ahead 91 games of gin when we left. Anyway, so Hank's telling us the story about his first acting job. He said, when I was Lorne Green, I was the double. He said, I didn't get paid residuals or anything. And he said, I've been in acting for 40 years, blah, blah, blah. He said, I'm doing a Gene Autry picture, and I'm the blacksmith. And he says, sure enough, they come to me and say, we're going to give you a speaking part. Well, I got so excited because now I get residuals. Now I get to go have lunch like a normal person. I don't get potato chips and a Coke. I can get a full lunch, you know. So here I am, and I said, what's my line? He said, well, Gene's going to ride up on the horse. He's going to say, did you see some riders come through here? And your line is, yes, I did. So Hank sat there all morning going, yes, I did. Yes, I did. I did. All morning. They break to go to lunch. He says, now I get in the lunch line. I can get a sandwich. I can get soup, salad, whatever I want. He said, but I can't eat because I'm going, yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Right. So sure enough, they break, go back to shoot the scene. And the director goes, now, Gene's going to ride the horse this way. And when he turns around, Champion's going to stop right on that mark there. Right there. And Gene's going to say, did you see some riders come through? And your line is, he goes, yes, I did. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. So sure enough, they said, did we need a rehearsal? No. And he goes, yes, I did. Yes. So Gene takes off. And when the horse turns back to come back, they clip the thing. And sure enough, Champion stopped right on the mark. And Gene goes, did you see some riders come through here? And Hank said, did I? So we're shooting our scene that afternoon. And in this scene, we do a little rehearsal. And Leslie Nielsen goes, he's out. And Hank's supposed to go. No, Hank goes, he's out. Leslie Nielsen goes, he's safe. Because as soon as they get the third out, Reggie Jackson's going to go shoot the queen. So, but they don't know that Reggie Jackson's the killer. Anyway. So Hank goes, he's out. Leslie Nielsen goes, safe. And Hank goes, out, safe, out. Safe. Why, you idiot, he was out the first time he runs out of the baseline. And Leslie Nielsen says, okay, you're out of here. Then I'm supposed to say, you can't throw an umpire out of the game. That was my line. That was my whole $9,000. You can't throw an umpire out of the game. So when I said that in rehearsal, the director goes, hey, Hank, when he throws you out of the game, you bow your chest out and say, what do you mean? And then, Joe, you come in on that line. So let's do it over. We need a rehearsal? Of course, everybody says no. Well, I'm thinking to myself, Hank has no chance. He's been rehearsing this. Has no chance whatsoever. Right? So they start. He's out. He's safe. He's out. He's safe. He's out. He's safe. Why, you idiot, he's out the first time he run out of the baseline. All right, you're out of here. And Hank bowled his chest out, and then he looked back at me and said, Joe, what's my line? Just like that. And when he did, when he looked back, I said, did I? When I said, did I, Leslie Nielsen said, would I? And Hank said, no, it's did I. And now they're going, did I? Would I? Did I? And the director's going, what in the world? It was funnier than the movie. So years later, I get on the plane with this Mr. Zucker, who was the director. And he says, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a baseball umpire. He said, I know a baseball umpire. I said, you do? He said, who's that? He said, Joe West. So I said, I'm Joe West.
That's great. So we're going to wrap this up, but I want, Derek, do you have any questions you want to ask Joe? Billy, do you have any questions you want to ask Joe? Come in.
I got one story for you that you're going to like. This is a good story.
Stay in, Derek.
We had a golf tournament we used to run at Doral. And we bring in musicians. We brought in Mickey Gilley. We brought in Boxcar Willie. We brought in Bobby Mackey from Cincinnati. Les Dudek from the Allman Brothers. We had the Wings bass player, Charlie Harrison. We had Rick Serrate from Whitesnake. We had and they'd get up and perform. This was great. Charlie McCoy came from Hee Haw, the harmonica player. Well, we invited this young outfielder for the Braves named Ryan Klesko. And Ryan was so excited. We gave everybody a Stetson Cowboy hat to get in. That was your entry ticket, right? Well, he was running around to all these musicians getting them to sign his hat. And he was so excited to be there. So the next year after the season, I get this phone call. And I don't recognize the number. I picked it up. Joe, yeah, Ryan Klesko. Yeah, how you doing? I don't know how he got my number. But anyway, he said, I want to take you pheasant hunting. Well, I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to pay me back for getting him in this golf tournament, right? So I said, that's great. I've never been pheasant. I've been duck hunting, goose hunting, bear hunting, deer hunting, but I've never been pheasant hunting. He said, yeah, about 12 of us going out on this ranch I got outside of Atlanta. I said, just a minute. What 12? He named off 12 big league ball players. I said, let me get this straight. You want me to walk out in an open field with 12 ball players with shotguns? Have you lost your mind?
That's hilarious.
You know, I got a comment about the Naked Gun only because you had said before that the umpire's not really the stars of the show. You're just part of the organization. But the funniest scene in that movie was Leslie Nielsen when he started moonwalking behind the plate and started hearing the crowds and he was throwing balls. That stole the movie. That was the funniest part of the movie, in my point. I thought it was terrific.
There you go. Look at that picture. You see that?
Yep, there you are. And that's your umpire. That's you talking about a senior moment. I just talked about Hank Robinson. That
was him. Yeah.
Yep.
You put a cowboy hat on him, look just like Lord Green.
I got a personal question for you, Joe. I got to. You're the second umpire I ever talked to, Major League umpire. I was 17 years old, and I was not supposed to be in a bar, but I was having a beer in a bar at 17 in the Bronx. And the guy next to me went to the bathroom, and the bartender said, that guy's a Major League umpire. And when he came back, he sat down next to me. He was a real affable guy. His name was John Mcsherry.
Yeah,
And,
John was one of my teachers at umpire school. Good friend. He was a great guy.
A real sweetheart of a guy. I think he had a heart attack behind the plate. I think he died while he was working.
He died on the field in Cincinnati opening day. Yeah.
Wow.
Unbelievable. But,
he was funny. He was a good guy. Good guy.
Oh,
good.
Yeah, he was just. I mean, I'm just a 17-year-old kid, but I was asking him stories, and I said to him, I said, "What a great job! I mean, you're an umpire." I said, "It must be amazing." I says, "Talking to all the big league players." He says, "I don't say a word to him, Billy.
Yeah.
I don't say nothing to him." He says, "Most of them guys are like so analytical." He says, "With the possible exception of Rod Carew." He says, "You could talk to Carew while he's hitting." He says, because he's just, how's the kids, right? Everything's good. I think I'm going to take this ball and smack it into left field. That's what he told me anyway. But a real nice guy, and I was wondering if you knew him.
Yeah, he was a good friend, and we miss him dearly. You know what? As disorganized as he was when we traveled, when he died, he had everything in place. It was like he knew he was going to die, and I really miss him. He was such a good friend. In fact, Frank, you're going to appreciate this. He introduced me to Rita.
Did he?
Wow.
I tell Rita all the time, you should be mad at Mcsherry.
Speaking of Rita, where is the athlete of the family?
She went to church. She goes to 4:00 mass every Saturday, so she doesn't have to go on Sunday. So
okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Derek, you have a closing question? I'll give it to you first, then I'll go to Derek, then I'll go to William.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. So the first question is, what does this picture bring back for you? Where were you? What were you thinking? Like
that was the release of the original album Blue Cowboy. That was in Los Angeles in the locker room.
Look at you.
And I don't know who televised the game that day, but they did a short interview with us before the game.
Gosh,
and how were you feeling back then? You look like you were a movie star, like a country star.
Yeah, I wish I was.
I will tell you that this season he's going to be moving a lot better because he's got 2 new knees and he's 30 pounds lighter.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
I applaud you for that, Billy.
You also had a bout with larynx cancer, I understand, and overcame that. And there's a great story with Ken Harrelson. I don't know if you,
what kind of cancer, Billy?
come on, will you stop picking on me?
Larynx?
This is the way I talk.
Larynx?
Isn't it larynx? Is it not a larynx cancer?
Larynx.
It's not funny about it anyway. Larynx. All right, I'm not a med guy, but you beat it, and of course, delighted to hear that. But there's a great story about Ken Harrelson. I don't know if it comes to mind, but I'd love to have you tell it because I read it.
Well, Ken was an announcer for the White Sox. And when the White Sox won the World Series, he thought I was the greatest umpire in the world because I happened to work in that World Series. But a couple years later, Mark Burley balked throwing the first base, and I called it on him. And he got mad because he was friends with Mark Burley. And Hawk was always a homer. He would announce for the White Sox. It didn't matter what happened; it was somebody else's fault. The White Sox were his team, and he still does that way. And he's retired, and he's still that way. So A couple of innings later, Mark Burley balked again, throwing to first base. And I called it again, and he threw his glove up in the air. And I said, if it comes down, you're gone. And so, and the plate umpire was going, oh, my word, no, because Mark Burley pitches fast. We don't want to kick him out of the game. We like him in the game. And I threw him out of the game. And I had already thrown Ozzie Smith out, or Ozzie Guillen, I should say, not Ozzie Smith. Anyway, so Hawk went on a tirade. Joe West is the worst umpire. He should retire. His career is over, blah, 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 blah. And I mean, it was awful. It was vicious. It was so bad, I actually talked to an attorney, and he said, you're a public figure. He can say what he wants to about you. Anyway, so the next year, I got throat cancer. And it is a scary thing when you're diagnosed with any kind of cancer. And luckily, I didn't have to have chemo. They did all radiation, burned terribly. But I got through it, and I've since checkups, everything is clean and clear, and so I'm grateful for all that. So when I worked, I missed the first 18 games of the season that year, and when I worked my first game in Chicago, it was my first game back, and so Steve Stone said, "This is Joe West's first game back. He's been out." And Hawk Harrelson said, "What for?" And he was being brash, and Steve said, "Well, he had throat cancer." And Hawk is a sentimental guy. He really is. So when the game ends, I'm in the shower, and this guy kicks in the door of the umpire's room, and it's Hawk Harrelson. The other three umpires are going, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" Because they knew that he had talked bad about me the year before. So he comes in the locker room, and I'm not there. They said, "Where?" He said, "Where is he?" And they point to the shower. He goes right in the shower, right? And I'm in. I got soap all in my hair and everything. I mean, he goes, "Look." He said, "You can fight me, you can hate me, you can beat me." He says, "But don't you ever die on me." Well, we've been friends ever since.
That's great. That's a great story.
I mean, and it's amazing. He'll call me out of the blue sometimes, and sometimes I call him out of the blue. It's really fun. And you talk about a guy that was happy when he got inducted in the Hall of Fame. He says, "I'm so proud." He said, I'm really glad for my family." I said, "Well, what about yourself?" But I mean, he is. He's as tough as his facade is. He's a sentimental guy. And I was in Chicago when he worked his last game with the White Sox, and we tried to call him afterwards. He could hardly talk, but it was interesting. And like I said, you're witnessing a piece of history every day. So.
Well, I'm going to close this interview. I'll quote Adam Wainwright, the Cardinals pitcher. He says, "The strike zone is as consistent as any umpire there is in the game. There are a few umpires who make you think, what is going on in that head of yours, but not Joe. He deserves a lot of credit. And in the field, he's consistently consistent about consistently making sure every rule is consistently followed." Joe, you're a consistent man. You're a great friend. I love you. I love your wife. And thanks for joining us on a Mick, a Mook, and a Mike.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's a real honor, man. A real honor.
Pleasure.
Great conversationalist. Wonderful. Thank you.
A rock on tour for sure.
A real deal.
Thank you. So that was great.
Yeah, he was fascinating, Frank. A great guest. Just 42 years in the big leagues, and I'm sure he could have talked for hours and hours and hours about different anecdotes of great ball players. You know, I mean, he's seen it all.
Yep, he has for sure. And I thought that I was going to have to apologize for you sometimes. I thought I was going to have to apologize for him sometimes, but I didn't have to apologize for anybody.
You know, when I read that story about Ken Harrelson, when he kicked open the door to get into the umpire's room, "Where is that son of a bitch?" And then he walked in and he was all full of soap and said, "Don't die on me," which is.
Oh, wait.
It's all right. It's all right. Whoever it is, it's Ed McMahon. You want some money?
Joe West, we're still shooting, pal. Okay. Hey, how are you, Rita? I just asked. This is you're going to be on the air because we're still doing the show because Joe called so quickly. I asked for Rita. We're still doing the show. I'll call you back. All right, bye.
What a sweetheart of a guy, you know. And there's a lot of jokes about when he reached the 53.75 or whatever. That's Bill Clem. When he reached the tie for second, he had 5,100 or whatever games. And somebody said that's 5,100 too much, you know, because. But if you haven't offended anybody, if you lived your whole life and you haven't offended anybody, you didn't stand for much. That's the way.
Joe stands for a lot. That's for
sure. He sure does.
So how do you want to close? Any parting words you have today, William?
Just with that William thing, I'm really getting offended with this William thing.
Offended? William, that's prestigious. He's giving you more respect.
Yeah, he's giving me respect. Huh? You see him attack me with the larynx thing because I couldn't pronounce larynx?
Well, you deserve that.
I didn't say throat.
You deserve that. 70 years on this world, you know how to say that word?
But I really enjoyed that. He was just great. I like I said, he could have probably went on forever. And how'd you know him, Frank? How'd you meet him?
His wife.
You met through Rita with the racquetball.
Yeah, Rita. I was working a racquetball tour in 1978. And she was a professional racquetball player on tour for a company that we sponsored called Echelon. And she was out, and we just hit it off. She's a great gal, and we stayed close all these years. And in maybe 2014, 2015, Karen and I have a house in Pebble Beach, and Joe was coming up there, and he was bringing a gal, and the gal he was bringing was Rita.
Wow.
That's how I met Joe through Rita.
Well, there you go with the 6 degrees of separation again. I happen to bring up John Mcsherry's name just because I was a kid and I was a press meeting in Umpire. Yep. And here's the guy who introduced him to his wife.
Yep.
It's small world, brother.
How'd you meet your wife, Derek?
I met her at acting school.
Both were acting like you liked each other, huh?
Wow, that was quick. Look at that. Look at the sharp blade over there. Woo!
Dig in there. Not that long.
Wow. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. I think my first wife, the first thing she said to me was we were at the house. She said, "You sure you're not a cop?"
Really?
No.
Oh, I was going to say.
That's what every hooker's supposed to say. Every hooker's supposed to say, "You sure you're not a cop?"
So you met Yesenia in Los Angeles.
I did.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, we met at, I don't want to say the name of the school, but it was a school in Beverly Hills.
Really?
She wasn't taking classes, I was, and she was she worked at the school. So.
Well, someday when all this COVID is over, the 6 of us will have to get together for dinner.
That'd be great.
For sure. Wait, I'll just declare it on camera. I'm buying.
Whoa, all right.
Wow. What do you think about that, Billy? You think that's possible?
I don't know. What's the most expensive thing they're selling in In-N-Out?
Well, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Where are we going?
This goddamn thing fell again.
I got to know, Derek, the acting bug. I didn't know you had the acting bug. Have you been on stage? Have you done any acting?
I did a few things. I that's why I came to LA, actually. It's a long story, so I won't get into it.
Really?
But yeah.
Did you know that, Frank, that he had the acting bug?
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he probably did some research. I never told him, so.
My friend Jay Thomas used to say, Mike, I went to acting school to learn how to fake orgasms.
That is hilarious.
Well, that's one thing I can't fake. I make more noise when I'm doing that than I laugh.
Oh, come on.
That's too much information for you guys, I know.
It's too much information.
Enthusiasm. That's the key, enthusiasm.
With that, let's say goodbye.
All right. Goodbye, Frank. Goodbye, Derek.
Oh, wait
a
second.
Everybody out there.
Before we say goodbye, next week our guest is Danielle Fishel and Jensen Karp. So we have a 2 for next week. Topanga is going to be on, and her husband Jensen Karp. So it'll be a great show again.
And don't forget, If These Lips Could Talk, it's out there. It's by acclaim. It's on Amazon. Joe West just said it's a fine read. Him and everybody else seems to think the same. And soon enough, a Lamar's Gamble will be close behind.
Yes. Congratulations on the new book, guys. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek.
All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. As that,
Adios, everybody. Thanks for looking in. We appreciate it.
as that sign's falling down in the back.
Step on that bookie.
Oh, all right.
We'll see you next week.